And this week I am very happy to have film reviewer, critic, and film lover and horror defender Michelle Swope of the venerated horror site Dread Central as my guest. I wanted to have Michelle on the show to get her viewpoint from someone who is not only out there on the front lines seeing what's new, different, and great, but also because she is someone who actually, can you believe this, gets film. Anyone can be a critic. I put that in quotes. As we discuss, online comments now pass as reviews. However, they are not critical thinking pieces that can look at a film within context and make a solid determination based on the evidence at hand. Michelle sees what's going on out there and also has a few thoughts on where the horror genre is going. I absolutely love talking with her. So sit back, have a coffee, an adult beverage, or whatever floats your boat, and enjoy Michelle Swope from Dread Central.
Pretty much what I do is I write about horror movies. That's all I do. Right now I'm doing pretty much mostly interviews, it seems like, but I do also write movie reviews. And I've been doing it for about 4 years or so. And the way I got started is I just saw an ad, I think it was on Facebook, that there was a site that was looking for writers to write movie reviews. And I thought, well, why not? So I just reached out to them and they were really good. They took me on, gave me a lot of pointers, gave me a lot of advice, and I think I've been really fortunate over the years to have editors who were willing to take a little time with me, if we needed that.
And in your reviews for starting out, did you have a bent or a focus for horror?
No, I just kind of started from nowhere, really. What I was doing, I was writing, it was for a site called Horror News Net, and
Yes.
I was kind of reviewing, I guess you would say, bad horror movies a lot of the time. So it was interesting and it was certainly challenging. I'm not the kind of person who believes in bashing a movie. Even if I don't like a movie, I think that there's a constructive way to talk about it, and you can still be positive about it. There's a lot of people out there who just, I don't know if they do it for clicks or likes or what their motivation is, but I know you've seen it. There's a whole lot of people out there who just enjoy bashing things, and especially movies when it comes to movies. And I just, trashing the filmmaker and things like that. I just don't think that there's a reason to do that. So that's never been my approach. I always try to keep it positive. And I can, write a review about a movie that I don't like without being mean.
Why is it that people took to the internet with all the things that the internet can do? It seems like the majority of people just want to hate on movies. What is the difference between the average comment, whether you find it on Rotten Tomatoes, you find it on IMDb, or just under one of your articles, under one of your reviews? What is the difference between that and a full-fledged reviewer?
That's really kind of a hard question, and that's just kind of how I am, first of all, as a person. I mean, that's just kind of who I am, and I don't think it's difficult. There is, with the internet, this mob mentality that we see with a lot of things, not just movies. People, for whatever reason, enjoy being part of the mob mentality and attacking things. And yeah, I don't know if it's for likes or clicks or what exactly motivates these people. Some of them, I think, are just enjoy being assholes, honestly. I mean, yeah, some of them I just can't come up with another reason for it.
I don't know why the internet has become such a megaphone for these assholes, and just to tear something apart for the sake of tearing apart based on what I love. Also, one of the things I constantly harp on are these trailer reviews. You can't judge a movie by a 30-second trailer or a 60-second trailer. I mean,
Yeah.
I equate it with walking into a restaurant, standing in the doorway, taking 3 sniffs and going, yup, this place sucks.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally agree with that. There have been movies where I've seen a trailer and gone, oh, wow, this looks awesome. And the movie, I didn't like the movie. Or, the opposite has been true. And you're right. You can't, judge a movie based on the trailer. And I don't really care for those trailer reviews. But I just feel like it's just I don't know, that there's just so much negativity in the world. People seem to thrive on that, especially nowadays. And I think, maybe that gets these people more attention if they're negative about movies and they trash them, and say the filmmakers are awful and things like that.
Somebody sends you a screener. It's a horror film. Let's just keep it simple for that way. They send it over to you. What do you look for? When you're sitting down, you pop this screener in, you click on that link. What do you look for?
I look for something different, something unique that I haven't seen before. Instead of the same old stories that we've all seen a million times, just something different. It doesn't have to be great. I'm a big fan of independent film, and that's kind of where my heart is. So I try to be supportive of indie filmmakers, especially. And yeah, you don't have to put a lot of money into it to make a good movie, and I firmly believe that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it done. So I just look for something unique that stands out in some way, or does it have a message, or is it really scary? Did they use cool practical effects? I really hate CGI. I don't like CGI at all, and I think we've had this conversation, you and I.
So what is it about you, whether a reviewer or a human being, that CGI puts you off of? What is that?
Well, part of it is, I grew up in the 80s when we had these awesome horror movies that were, all these cool practical effects, and so some of it is nostalgia for me, but it's just what I like. I don't, it seems like everything is computerized these days. There's all these superhero movies, I'm not a fan of those. There's nothing wrong with if you like superhero movies, that's cool, if that's your thing, but it's not my thing. And it just seems like everything is computerized. And when I sit down and watch a horror movie, I don't want to see that. It's still possible to do amazing practical. In 2019, it's not something
Yeah.
that went away with the 80s.
I think one of the biggest mistakes made is, the easy access to behind the scenes or how it's done extras on DVDs and online now and everything, because it's kind of like a magician giving away the secrets. Like, I really don't want to know how Rob Bottin did the effects for The Thing. When you start seeing these people showing you, well, we did this and we did this shortcut and we got this and it's a puppet, you're kind of like, oh. But we seem to like want to consume these details. So for me, yes, it's nostalgia. Like you said, I grew up in the 80s as well. But with CGI, we kind of already know how it's done. Well, they did it on a computer.
I agree. I agree with what you just said. I usually don't want to know the magic behind it. There's once in a while I'll see something that is really unusual or it catches my eye for some reason, and I'll be like, I really wonder how they did that. But
Yeah.
usually in general, I don't want to know, because yeah, it does take away some of the magic behind it, and I kind of prefer to keep the magic.
It also allows people to suddenly think they've become the experts, and now, oh well, I know how they did this and then they do that and blah 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 blah, and they start pontificating, which then channels into this know-it-all attitude, which manifests itself on the internet in comments and so-called reviews, in which actually they may know how to do some of these things, but the fact is, I've seen so many reviewers, like full-fledged reviewers, that really truly don't know film.
I'm never going to say I know everything there is to know about a subject. I don't think you ever can. And
Right.
I enjoy the fact that I'm as old as I am and I'm still constantly learning new things. That's something that appeals to me. Yeah, you're there, but you're right. There are people who just want to be experts and go on the internet and brag about, oh, I know everything about this, and I know how they did all of this. Look at me, I'm so smart. Okay, well,
Well, they'll do that, but for example, I use an example in a previous interview with, I chose a stylistic effort on Garlic and Gunpowder to use rear projection green screen to mimic that look of 1960s and 70s films where they're driving, and you can obviously tell they're driving in front of a projected screen, but that was a stylistic choice by the director to do that.
Mhm.
And I did it with Garlic and Gunpowder, and you have people go, oh, well, with today's CGI and blah, 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 they could have done a better job. And it's like, you may know the technology, but you don't know film. because I chose for it to look that way. I wanted it to look like that because this is a throwback to It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And with that projection, like that car chase with Dick Shawn and all that stuff, it's very clear they're two vehicles on rockers in front of a projection screen. And when James Bond, when Sean Connery's driving the Aston Martin on a highway and the car is following him, and we can very clearly see he's obviously not outside and he's not in a car. And in fact, for me, it would have been cheaper just to shoot it normally than to go through all the green screening and rotoscoping and all that stuff that goes with it.
Right. And yeah, but you're right. That was a choice,
Right.
on the part of the filmmaker. And I think that people should respect that more than they generally seem to.
You have all these new movies coming out, and some of them are tips of the hat to previous films from 10, 20, maybe even 40 years ago. And yet people aren't understanding that at all. So what do you see coming down the pike for the genre itself? What do you do about a generation, or not even a generation, a multitude of people that simply not only don't know, is that important that people should have some kind of film, and specifically in horror, some kind of horror literacy?
Yes, it's important. And my husband and I talk about this a lot because, I'll see something that someone said online and just be annoyed. And so we kind of vent to each other, things like, there's been all these articles coming out written by young people who aren't familiar with movies made even, 30 years ago. And I think that's absurd. The access that we have to the internet and to digital and oh my gosh, we can, we have access to just about anything we would ever want as far as movies and entertainment goes. So why aren't these people spending more of their time educating themselves about movies from 30, 40, 50 years ago instead of writing these, think pieces on why a movie from 1985 was problematic in 2019, by 2019 standards. That kind of thing really irks me. And look it up. Oh my gosh, if you don't know, Google is an actual thing that you can use. I'm always reading things, and yeah, if I don't know, if I have a question about something, I'll look it up.
Well, then we roll into that CGI thing that you were talking about, and that is when people become so used to something. Like, for example, you look at, like, I've heard people make fun of, like, the original Godzilla, for example, the original 1954, and they go, well, it's obviously it's a guy in a suit. However, if you look at some aspects of the legendary films, well, it's very clear it's all green screen, and it's all, those landscapes aren't real, and they're animated. Our eyes and our minds, I should say, have come to accept this as, well, this is the new normal. And anything else. I mean, think of the CGI in Independence Day. I mean, there's Roland Emmerich blowing smoke up our ass saying, well, we waited 20 years to develop these effects. So you waited 20 years for processing speeds, because what is here that is just so amazing?
Yeah, and I just dislike it so much. And maybe I'm getting old, maybe that's it. I don't know, but I just really dislike CGI. And it's kind of sad because I've almost gotten to the point where I'll screen a new horror movie, and if it's, completely practical effects, I get really excited.
Yeah.
Like, that's, oh my God, it's actually not CGI'd. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of a sad state of affairs, I think, that I have that mindset at this point, because everything, literally everything, is CGI'd to death. I don't understand the appeal. I just really don't like it.
There you are, you're a film reviewer, you get a screener that comes in the horror department. Are you seeing more reliance on CGI, from things like CGI blood to other things where practical could have stood in? And what do you do in a situation like this? I mean, what do you see coming down the line for the genre, especially with the idea and the concept? We can move even away a little from CGI to the fact that so many remakes, reboots, all of this stuff. What are you seeing coming down the line for the genre as a whole? And will anything ever swing back? Will the pendulum go back to the glory days of the 70s horror, which is extremely different from 80s horror? What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, it does seem like I'm seeing a lot more straight not CGI, straight practical effects in horror movies, which I think is a good thing. There was a movie that came out recently. I'm not going to give away the name of it or who it was, but that I really, really love. And when I talked with the director, they told me they shared there's a monster, a creature in the movie, and we talked about how we were discussing the creature itself, and they were like, "Did it look okay?" And I was like, "No, I loved it. It was great." And they shared that they had just kind of tweaked the eyes just a little bit with a little, computerized stuff.
Sure.
And I was like, "Did you really?" Like, I totally couldn't tell, but we were having a conversation about whether or not I thought the monster looked good. And I did think it looked really good. Like, I really love the monster. But yeah, they shared that that was all that they did, was they just tweaked the eyes a little bit, around the eyes and around the mouth to make it a little more lifelike. But I thought that was an interesting conversation because, I mean, if I had my way about it, I would like to see things continue going in that direction. In terms of where horror is going, that's a good question because I think about this a lot because in the past couple of years we've seen new terms, the new terms elevated horror and prestige horror have been floating around, and even directors like people like Ari Aster and Jordan Peele aren't referring to their movies as horror movies, and
Right.
that kind of boggles my mind. But and it's really frustrating when clearly what they're making is horror. Um, but these movies have been, big moneymakers and have just been insanely popular. And I don't know if they're hesitant to associate themselves with the term horror, because they feel like that's not going to be as popular. Horror is still sort of looked down upon,
Yes.
even though movies like Get Out and Midsummer are hugely popular, and they are horror movies. Horror is still kind of thought of as, slashers and blood and gore and that kind of thing. And, this whole idea of a horror movie being thought provoking or making some socio-political statement is not new at all. I mean,
Thank you.
you can look way, way back in the history of horror, and it's always been there. Horror movies have always in some way spoken to the current climate as far as what's going on in the world right now. And I think that's one thing that's so cool about horror. It doesn't have to be in your face, obvious what they're talking about, but it can still make a statement and make you think, and not just be blood and gore and slashers, because that's not what horror is.
Well,
So
and I think horror is always at its worst when it has an agenda. Horror, like you
yeah,
said, should just be pure and do its job without trying to aspire to something or be rude. I mean, technically, wouldn't we call Rosemary's Baby elevated horror?
and I mean, Get Out wasn't my favorite horror movie of what year was that? 2017.
I
And
believe so,
just
yeah.
the mere fact of me saying that, well, it wasn't my favorite horror movie that year. People thought I was a hater. And I'm like,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
I'm not hating on it at all. It's an excellent movie, but you know, as far as my taste in horror and the things that I want to see, that wasn't my favorite movie that year. So what? I mean, we
Right.
don't have to like the same things.
Well, but see, we do. You see, on the internet, you and I can disagree as long as we disagree on the same thing. So, when you have a Get Out, or for example, I'm sitting in It Chapter 2 last weekend, and Michelle, it was the first time in years that I'm looking at the time, I'm looking at my phone and I'm going, oh my God, when is this over? And everybody's like, it's it. And it's like, yeah, it's it. We're looking at things through nostalgia for a love of the original one with Tim Curry. But everybody's forgetting what Stephen King really went after in the book, and that the filmmakers and studios were nervous about the true essence of what King did, because there is a very important scene from the book that was totally deleted, and what they did to replace it in chapter 2 was pretty lame. And then we have to have kind of an agenda there too, where one of the characters is gay and had a secret gay love. And it's like, I don't understand what this has to do with anything. Why don't you focus more on why these kids are so important to the destruction of it, which was not covered in the first part, is not covered in the second part, but is extremely well covered, that the universe handpicked these kids in King's book to do battle with, and that's never covered. I mean, the blueprint was there with the book. Just make the movie out of the book.
Right, exactly. That's what I don't understand. I mean, I've seen people debating. I haven't had a chance to see it chapter 2 yet, but I've seen all these debates online where, people fighting about the fact that there's things in the movie that aren't in the book and vice versa. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is just
Right.
ridiculous. I mean, but you're right. Yeah, there's so much uh, material there in the book because King's work is just freaking scary.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be difficult to make
Right. Well, and
a
I
movie.
agree. Like someone wrote online, I'm so impressed with the filmmakers of It Chapter 2 to open the movie about homophobia. It's like, first of all, you didn't read the book because that is a key scene in the book. So don't be giving credit to the filmmakers for simply adapting what Stephen King did 30
Right,
years ago.
right, exactly.
Okay. Before homophobia became a permanent part of our lexicon, King wrote about that. And the point is, the guy is attacked not because of his sexuality, but because he was childlike. It was very clear in the book. That's why it broke its usual modus operandi of killing children and went after this guy. But instead, that's all lost in the film translation. And it's simply because I guess, he was the victim of an attack and they throw him in the water and it just happened to be there.
Yeah, that's where the focus needs to be. And I mean, you're totally right. It just seems like so many people have a specific agenda that they want to push with, their movie a lot of the time now. And that isn't how it should be. Just make a horror movie. Right. What happened to a movie just being scary?
Right.
Just being scary, like actually scary. Like I feel like I'm always on this quest to find the scariest movie I can find, because that feeling of fear, I've talked to other horror fans about this, that feeling of being afraid is like a rush, and I feel like I'm always chasing that, I'm always trying to get my next, horror fix, sort of, I guess I would say. And it doesn't happen very often, so, and I watch a lot of horror movies, like a ridiculous amount of horror movies. Because I'm always looking for that next really good scare. But when you find it,
So
it's fantastic.
what would you say then is in all the movies you've seen since a child, what is the scariest movie to Michelle Swope?
Oh my goodness, people always ask me that, and it's so hard to pick one. Um, Gosh. Well, when A Nightmare on Elm Street came out, um, that terrified me. So I would have to say probably A Nightmare on Elm Street or even The Ring. Really, I can't think of another movie that scared me as bad as The Ring.
What was it about these two films that struck you? Because I heard someone say one time that the most important thing about horror is that it's personal. What scares one does not scare another. There are people who have strong religious convictions who think The Exorcist is the most terrifying, yet somebody without those religious convictions thinks it's a total laugh riot. A
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street. What was it? You must have been probably in your teens, I take it, when you saw it.
Something
If you
like
saw it
that.
in the
Something
theaters.
like that. Somewhere close to that age, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But what was it that appealed to you about it that struck a chord in you?
just the whole idea of Freddy getting you in your sleep. Maybe, and gosh, I just now kind of had a revelation. I never thought about this until you just asked me that question. But I've always had problems with sleep. Like my entire life, I've had sleep problems, like mainly trouble sleeping, and like ever since I was a little kid, even. And maybe that's why. Like, how come that's never occurred to me? I can't believe I never thought of that. But yeah, just the whole idea that he could get you in your sleep really terrified me. Like, I didn't want to go. I slept with the lights on for like a week or two after that movie because I was so scared he was going to come get me in my sleep. And of course, the fantastic scene that I just think it's such an awesome scene with Amanda Wisk going all over the ceiling and the
Oh,
blood.
yeah.
I love that scene so much. That's one of my favorite horror movie scenes. Um,
Yes.
and just yeah, I think just the whole sleep thing is what scares me so bad about it.
So for you, as a woman who had trouble sleeping, Freddie is a problem for you.
Yeah,
There it is.
yeah,
There's
but
your
I don't think
personal
I ever
connection.
connected it to my sleep problems until just now, and I feel so silly because that's never occurred to me. But that has to be why. That has to be it.
I'm terrified of the water, and yet Jaws is my favorite movie of all time. But when I watch Jaws, and especially the attack that bothers me the most is the opening. And it's not because I don't swim, because I think something's going to eat me. I can't stand the feel of the water. I don't like being under it. And when I see scenes in movies where people are drowning, I remember The Abyss, if you remember that scene where they had to swim and share the air kind of
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
the water is coming up and one of them is going to have to drown. That's what's
yeah.
going to happen. I mean, I'm sitting in the theater, my fingers were dug into the armrests because it's like, I mean, I've experienced that. I agree with that person that said that horror is personal. It's something that touches something in us. And like you said, may not even be aware that it's touching something personal in you, but there's a reason why something stands out that way.
Yeah, I agree. It is personal. And that's, your preference, I guess, of whatever subgenre, you tend to enjoy, I think is personal. So
Absolutely. And I think that's where horror works its best. So as a reviewer, and someone who's seeing, like you said, you've seen so many horror films. What do you see coming down the pike, and how do you feel about the genre? What do you see coming in, and what are some disturbing trends? We'll start wrapping it up there. Like, what do you see that concerns you as a reviewer and a film, and what do you see as hope and good things that are coming?
well, I think the biggest thing that concerns me is what I mentioned earlier about filmmakers referring to their movies as something other than horror.
Interesting.
For Ari Aster to call Hereditary a family drama, I mean, what? I just, I don't know. It seems like they're reaching for any other way to describe it than
Yeah.
horror. And it's a horror movie. Oh my God, it's just so simple. I get so frustrated with that, and that really concerns me, especially when those movies are doing so well. And yeah, they're fantastic movies, and they should be doing well, but they need to be called horror movies. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They're horror movies, and it's okay to like horror movies. So that's something that really concerns me. As popular as like Get Out, Hereditary, Midsummer, as popular as those movies are, that really worries me that we're going to continue in that direction. But I hope that I'm wrong, and filmmakers will learn to embrace the word horror. It's not a dirty word. Um, that's what I hope will happen. I just, like I said, I really enjoy indie horror, indie film in general, but especially independent horror. And there just have been some really amazing films that I've come across, especially in recent years. And it's usually hard for these, filmmakers to get the word out about their movies. But we might be doing a little better with that. I think, with a lot of those movies playing the festival circuit, and word will start to get around, about a particular movie. A lot of them do go to VOD, which I think makes them more accessible. Because if, let's say a really indie horror film is released in theaters, it will be in a really, really limited release. And unless you live in, LA or New York or somewhere, which I don't, I live very far from either one of those places, you'll never be able to see that movie. And that's something that frustrates me. But it seems like a lot more are going to VOD, which, like I said, will give people more access, I hope. I mean, I'm hoping this is what's happening. And I would like to see those movies get more exposure. I know that those, indie filmmakers don't have big budgets to work with. They don't have a lot of money to put into marketing and things. But like I said, usually those films rely on word of mouth. I have had so many filmmakers tell me that they appreciated, just when they see people discussing their movie and recommending it to other people, because that's how people find out about their movie, just from word of mouth. And so, yeah, I think just that's something I'm hopeful for, that independent film will get more exposure. And like I said, I'm hoping that, with these movies playing festival circuits and early word starts to get out, and then with them going to VOD, giving people more access, that's something I'm hoping that will improve.
I think that's a great assessment right there, and a great way to end this interview. I can't even thank you enough for that. I think it's terrific, that insight.
Well, you're welcome. I just get so frustrated seeing these indie filmmakers, not being able to pay their rent or whatever. And, things like that just frustrate me when they're putting out such amazing films. And yeah, I'm really frustrated by that.
The problem is that the theatrical venues are just crowded by this giant big budget product, and there's just no way. I mean, a film like Halloween, if it were released now instead of 1978, it would be on VOD. It would never make the theaters. It wouldn't have time to find an audience. It wouldn't have time to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty insane.
So,
Yeah.
Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being on. I think this is great. You're even welcome for the therapy session to find out why Nightmare on Elm Street scared you.
Yes, thank you. I can't believe that's never occurred to me. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for asking me to be on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I hope you had a good time, and I'm going to let Amanda Wiss know about this too. So I'm sure
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
Enjoy knowing. Yeah, she is. I love her. So it's terrific. So, but yes, I thank you so much for being on. And again, continuing our professional relationship into the future. I always look forward to what you write, whatever I send you. So whether it's good or bad, I love it. So thank you for all the work that you do and also for not just the genre, but for film in general.
Thank you. Thank you.
Head on over to iTunes and give me a like and review. And if you want to read my cinema blog, you'll find it at horrorfuel.com/author/Harrison.